Hi, this is Malini. Today I'm going to show you how to redo or revive a succulent container garden. Eventually succulents will outgrow their containers, so you can revive them by replacing them or removing them completely, and you can do this at home. The materials that you would need is basically a succulent mix which has no peat moss, because peat moss is too acidic and it retains too much moisture for succulents. The second thing you need is an assortment of succulents that you want to use to replace your garden, or cuttings that you have at home. You always want to wait for those cuttings to dry first before you replant them in your garden. And another thing you'll need is some top dressing. This is what I have at home. So anything you have at home, any kind of top dressing or sand would be sufficient, or you can buy some rocks. This is what I have here, and I'm going to use one of these after I finish making the garden. And the last thing you need is just a little paintbrush. This is a good thing to have if you want to brush off any dust or soil after you finish planting. So some helpful hints before you start is to assess the garden, see what needs to be replaced or you can still keep. This is a garden that I had on my patio table. It had full sun and not as much water, so you see a lot of red tones. It seems very dry, but I could still keep some of the succulents and revive them with a little more water, or I can replace some of them with some fresh succulents that are already rooted. So the first thing you want to do is take some of the rocks that you have in the container, and this helps when you want to completely redo the garden. This is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to basically redo this whole container garden, but I'm going to keep some of the plants that I have. I don't want to throw them away. I want to keep them and use them, and then revive them with a little more water. It'll still get actually full sun. In my area here, it doesn't really have any shade, so you have to basically work with what you have. And again, succulents are really forgiving. They can tolerate a lot of heat and not as much water, and they'll still be alive. Okay, so I'm going to remove actually all these succulents here, and these are all fully rooted, so don't be afraid to take them out and pull them apart like you see fit. Obviously this one is really dry, but again, it's still alive, and you can still use this in your containers or your landscapes. Now a lot of people do replace the whole garden with all fresh succulents, and that's fine too. For the purpose of this video, I'm just want to show you that you can still keep a lot of succulents that you have and still use them in your container garden. All we're doing today is removing some of these plants and possibly keeping some of them, or I might plant these in their own separate containers and use them later. Okay. Now I'm going to dump this soil and I'm going to show you, I'm going to use fresh soil. You can still use this in your garden, or you can dump it in separately. Okay, I'm going to put this away and be right back. So here's the container without the old soil. It has a screen on the bottom here. I'm going to use the same screen, and you want to use that screen to prevent any soil to come out, but allows the water to drain. So I'm going to fill the container with some fresh soil. I go about halfway. You can adjust that you see fit. And then all I'm doing here is basically redoing the garden with fresh soil and adding some succulents. I'm going to add some other succulents that I see here. This is also kind of dry, but like I said, I'm not going to throw any of these succulents away. I'm going to use them in my landscape, or plant them separately, or reuse them in this garden, and then we'll water them. Okay, So you want to dig a hole just a little bit to allow the succulents to be able to plant your succulents. And then this is another plant here. This is not part of this plant. I'm going to save that. And sometimes what you have to do is that you have to remove some of the excess and dried leaves. That helps keep your garden looking fresh and neat, but allowing the plant to grow, because when you have all these dried leaves, that could constrict its growth as well. So I don't really take a lot of soil out because there's a lot of roots here, but I just remove a little bit. And then you just kind of continue building your garden. It's really enjoyable and quite fun to do this, especially when you're at home a lot and you want to take up a nice hobby, and gardening is a great hobby. Just add a little more soil. Okay. Now I might not make this garden as full. I might actually allow a lot of places for it to grow. So what I'm going to keep here is, this is known as a Echeverry red velvet. It's a little bit wilted, but it can still, you'll see it will still be revived. I'll do another video or post a picture on Instagram, on our Instagram page for the Cactus Center, and you'll be able to see this garden. Probably take probably a couple more weeks to maybe almost a month before you start seeing it revive itself with some water, of course, with some help with water. That will help. Okay. This one is still very healthy. I'm going to keep this one. I think that's still very healthy. And this can be a nice little hanging. It actually can trail a little bit, so I'm going to put it at the edge here. I thought this was still a very pretty and healthy plant with a nice reddish tones that's caused by the full sun. I'm also going to add that. I'm going to put this back here. Again, I'm still keeping some of the succulents that we have from the previous garden. And then I'm going to plant the rest in other containers. The one thing about gardening, it can get pretty messy, but that's also the joy of it, is that you don't really have to be perfect, okay? You can do this in your own time and still have a lot of enjoyment. Okay, I was looking at this one still. I do really like this one, even though if you can see when it's wilted, it means it's dry, but it's still very healthy, and I'm still going to use this. Put this in the back here because it does get a little bit tall. Now, what I do want to not keep is mainly this one. This is very dry. I'm still going to keep this, but I don't think it will look nice in the garden. I'm going to add some of the fresher succulents, like this one. And this one is a nice succulent that we can add probably in this, in the front here. Now, because it's going to be on a patio table, I'm going to make it look where you can see from all directions. So you can see the container garden in a 360-degree perspective, and that make it look nice. Again, you can make your garden any way you like. If you have a patio table, you don't necessarily have to make it so symmetrical and a 360 view, but that's what I'm doing for this particular container. You see in the back here, I have a lot of room. Okay, there's a lot of room here. So I'm going to add like one of these, maybe two of these. Let's add this one. This is really pretty. And I'm also going to add the blue chalk sticks. It's the Senecio serpens blue chalk sticks. And this one is a nice, gives you a little bit of a pop of color, not all red. You see a lot of reds here. I'm trying to offset it with a little bit different colors. So I decided to change my perspective here by making it more full. You know, you can change your mind as you make your garden. That's what I tend to do when I think, hey, you know what? I have some other succulents and I think it'll look nicer and I still have a lot of room. So I'm gonna add one more. I'm gonna add this beautiful little donkey's tail. This is a hanging one and it's really healthy and very easy to grow, and it works really well with all these succulents that I have in this container. So now you'll see why the brush is important to have. This is the brush that I mentioned earlier, and we're just gonna brush off any dirt that's inside the succulents, adjust the plants as you see fit. And the fun thing about making succulent container gardens for yourself, again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's really the enjoyment of making a garden and seeing plants grow. And that's one of the enjoyments I have, is making gardens and seeing it grow, seeing it flower, and enjoying the idea of making something that you did yourself. Okay. So I'm going to add some rocks. I think that's really the end thing. Again, forgive my mess. This is something that is sort of impossible not to have mess when you're making a garden. So I had some green glass I have at home. I also have this color here. This is more of a fun color, I think more of an Easter kind of looking color, right? With some pastels. This will look fine here. I'm gonna probably stick right now with the green glass. And all I do is just add the rocks around it. And that's really all you need to do. After you redo your garden, you add your top dressing, which helps stabilize the plant. After you water it, plants will stay in place easier, and it keeps it sturdy. And the last thing is, it adds a nice finishing touch to your container garden. Now this container garden basically should be watered at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, especially in the area that I'm putting in, and we're approaching summer, and it's getting full sun, about twice a week when it gets really hot in the summer. But on average, plants that are grown outdoors in filter light should be watered about once a week on average. Fertilizing is basically March through October. You use either water-soluble one, and use that once a month. Just use a regular Cactus succulent fertilizer. Or you can use a slow release one, and that one you just sprinkle around. You can sprinkle on top of the rocks, and that will dissolve or absorb slowly into the soil, and that's every 3 months. So that I would recommend doing that again during the growing season for most plants is between March to October. Okay. All right, let me take my brush again. So I think this looks a lot better. If you remember what it looked like before, you see what it looks like now. A little bit more polish and a little bit more fresh. So there you have it. You can redo your own succulent container garden at home using fresh succulents or cuttings and using the right soil, and you'll enjoy this for many years. Well, thank you for watching.